Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today we have with us Dena Lewis. First and foremost, Dena is a mother, and this is a Mother's Special episode for Mother's Day, in honor of Mother's Day. She's been in the medical sales space as capital equipment device rep, as a spine device rep, as an ophthalmology sales rep. She's really had quite the career. And today we get to sit with her and listen to her experience on all of these different positions that she's held in the medical sales space. As always, we do our best to bring you innovative guests that are doing things a little bit differently in medical sales. So thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Hey, Dena, how are we doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Why don't you tell the audience who you are and what you do?
So I'm Dena Lewis. I am currently a med device contractor rep for a large spine company in the U.S. Been doing that for a little while in the spine space. I go into the operating room on a daily basis and just do case support.
Got it. So, we've had a lot of guests on the show that have been in the spine space, but, I want to get your take on it. And I want to go through your history, because what you guys might not know is Dena has very, very vast experience in medical sales. She's done a number of roles in a number of fields, and she's going to touch upon quite a few of them today. But let's start with spine. In a nutshell, what would you say your experience in spine has been?
Well, so it's interesting because in the spine world, you kind of have two categories. You have the day-to-day hardware that typically tends to repair discs and different disruptions of the spine. And then what I do is more disruptive. So I do technology that is really changing the way people live from a pain perspective and giving them quality of life back. And one specific product is still fairly new to the market and extremely disruptive in the space. So for me, that is an attractive point. It's not so much about what I'm selling and what company I'm working for. It's more about selling something that's disruptive that I know is going to change the way people live and helping improve their quality of life.
That is exciting. Is this product, is it where you talk to patients as well, or you specifically only talk to providers?
Just providers. We just mostly deal with surgeons. This industry, of course, clinically, I tend to fall on the side of clinical roles where I just try to get more surgeon buy-in and end-user buy-in, but we always deal with hospital administration. It always typically comes down to cost and how we're going to get it placed in the facility. So I deal with C-suite, OR buyers, clinical managers, surgeons, so just a plethora of different players, but don't typically deal with patients unless it's someone I know personally that I know is going through something that could benefit from a product I sell.
Sure. Now, one thing I want to highlight is women in spine. There's a lot of assumptions about what it's like for women in spine, and I would love for you to share with us what some of those might be and what your take is and what any woman that's considering going to spine should be thinking about.
So first of all, our industry in general doesn't have a lot of women. Women are more typically in support roles, clinical roles, clinical account, CAM type roles, as we call them. But it's very hard to find women in the OR in kind of the orthopedic space, so to speak. For me, this has been my whole career, but I've never based anything I've sold on really a specialty, so to speak. I just go after, again, like I mentioned earlier, the clinical value, and I have just somewhat found myself in more male-dominated roles. Mm-hmm. So women in spine specifically, I think is unique. It's changing a little bit. I think you see more women in the spine space than you do maybe the orthopedic space. And there is a huge need, I think, for that to change. Women can bring so much value, but then again, you don't see a lot of female orthopedic surgeons either. It's a hard job. Orthopedic surgeons deal with large joints, a lot of time on their feet, a lot of manual manipulation. So physically, it can be a very tough job. job. But for us as med device reps, we bring value to our surgeons in the OR from a consulting perspective. So I think that there are more female minds that should be involved in that, because I think we can bring a lot of value to that space.
I believe it. I believe it 200%. Okay. And then for women that are thinking about getting into spine, what would you share with them?
I think look for a product that you can be passionate about. I mean, whether it's spine or any of the other various things I've done in my career, if you can't be passionate about it, then it's not worth selling, because it is a hard job. And you've got to get up sometimes, at hours of the day when other people are not even moving, especially if you're going to get into like a trauma related role.
Sure.
So you've really got to love what you do. You cannot do this job just for the money. I mean, the money is good, but you work very, very hard for it. But the plus side to it is that you get so much value at the end of the day, knowing that you've made a difference in someone's life. Like, I look at patients that have been in pain for years, and simply what they're implanting in this, lady that maybe is 70 years old, that's extremely kyphotic, and she might have osteoporosis. What she looks like and feels like after the surgery and recovery is she's getting her quality of life back. So at the end of the day, for me, the value, of course, the money is good, but the value comes more from just what we do for people.
Absolutely. So before you jumped into spine, you were in ophthalmology. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So let's get into that space, because that's a space that I think there isn't enough information about as a whole. What is ophthalmology? Go ahead and describe it to the audience. Remember, our audience are people that have never been in medical sales, as well as people that have been in medical sales in all different facets of medical sales. How would you describe ophthalmology to our audience?
So ophthalmology is such a wide breadth. And I'm going to back up for a second. I jumped off of a bridge when I went into ophthalmology because it was the only part of the anatomy I had never done before. So I had done so many other things, and I thought, well, the eyeball, I haven't done that. So here we go. But ophthalmology, the range of what you can do in that space, it can be anything from more retail heavy on like contact lenses, dry eye devices, things that you typically deal more physician office-based products, or B2B. And it can be something as involved as surgical. So maybe you've heard of LASIK, where people go in and have their vision corrected, or IOLs, which are intraoperative lenses, where they actually go in and replace the lens in your eye with an intraoperative lens to give you better vision. That typically is common for people with like cataracts or have some other type of vision problems, and they have IOLs, which is an implant in your eye. So it can really vary. It can be something as simple as what you buy over the counter, drops, eye drops, or something that if you have dry eye, you can buy dry eye drops over the counter. Pharmaceutical has a lot of products in the ophthalmology space. So if you're looking to get into this space, there's so many different things you can do. If you're not someone that wants to be in an operating room, doesn't deal well with blood, then maybe the surgical side of ophthalmology is not right for you. Maybe more the retail contact lenses, drops, things like that are something that fit your life a little easier.
Talk to us a little bit about the difference in lifestyle between the two types of ophthalmology medical sales you can do.
So I think the biggest difference, again, is the commitment level. I had the best work-life balance when I was in the ophthalmology space because I did choose to be more on the retail side. I came out of the surgical world during COVID, and ophthalmology was actually one of the spaces that really didn't shut down. It did from a surgical perspective, but the rest of the world was still rolling. We still needed to see. People still needed glasses. They still needed their contact lenses. So ophthalmology offices opened quicker than most doctors' offices, physician offices did. So we were still very busy. I came out of the operating room during COVID to move into this space. So my work-life balance was great when I was in that role because I had a 9 to 5. I would go in, I would call on physicians during the day. There is a lot of reporting, a lot more metrics than what I was used to in med device, because in med device, we're in the operating room consulting. Our reporting comes typically at the end of the day or even sometimes over the weekends. So it was just a different work-life balance. Surgically, again, you're in the operating room. Your hours can vary. So if that's something that's intriguing to someone to spend a lot of time, on your feet all day in an OR, then the surgical side might be better.
What's the range in salary between the two, the retail side and surgical side within ophthalmology?
So I think it varies by company. I still made very good money in the retail side. I mean, I call it the retail side. It was still considered patient interfacing, but I didn't make as much as I did in surgical. In med device specifically, you're always going to do better on the device side, but I would say it's equivalent probably to a pharma rep.
Got it. Okay. And with ophthalmology, what does the ascension look like? Is it the same as in any medical sales rep? And then if you want manager, and then if you want executive, or are there different, maybe even more nuanced roles in the ophthalmology space?
So I think with all of them, they're pretty consistent. You start out, especially if you've never been in the industry, I always recommend to people, if they've never ever been in this industry, whether it's the device or, more the retail side, look for a company that might be looking for a junior rep or a territory assistant. They're going to provide you amazing support. They're going to put you out in the field without the expectation of knowing everything the day you go out. There's less pressure because you're learning under typically a senior rep. And then from there, you do get moved up, especially in the med device space. Some of the bigger players, they have really great junior associate roles. And when you move up into your own territory. So the hierarchy is very similar. They want to know that you can carry the bag successfully before they move you into a management role. Not all great reps make good managers. Right. Med device tends to have more, have you ever heard of the DISC assessment? So med device tends to employ more high D, high I personalities. Those sometimes don't make the best managers. So you look at the qualities in a person, you look at their ability to track metrics and reporting, and those people tend to typically get moved up into a management role. A lot of reps choose to stay in their role because they make more money as a rep than they do as a manager. So.
Yeah. Okay. So in the ophthalmology space as well, can you go from retail to surgical side and surgical to retail? Is it that easy to make the switch? Or once you're in retail, you're kind of, retail for life, or once you're in surgical for life? How does it work?
I think you could. Again, it's going to be based on the company, but the one company I've had experience with was really amazing at promoting from within. And they were also very good at personal growth. So if there was something you were interested in and you have proven yourself in your own space and done really well, you've proven yourself as far as your numbers, you've posted good numbers, you've had a good territory, you have good feedback from your customers, they were always willing to allow someone to look at other opportunities. And what was great is that they did it without discrimination. So if you wanted to move into a different role, I had a situation specifically, and I went to my manager and he said, you know what, I think you would be amazing, and I don't want to hold you back. So, and he actually helped me. I think it just really depends on the company and the experience and what you've proven in the space.
What would you say the biggest nuance to ophthalmology sales is compared to traditional, or more, not even traditional, more common medical device roles and more common retail pharmaceutical sales roles?
So I think being on both sides, for me, the one thing I enjoyed the most is I didn't have to be credentialed any longer. So when you are in med device, there is a very involved credentialing process you have to go through to be able to get into a hospital and into the operating room. It's very expensive. Most companies do pay for it for their reps, but you have to keep all of that up on an annual basis. So think of like a nurse who has to have all of her shots and all of her immunizations, all of this training that you have to go through, HIPAA violation training, bloodborne pathogen training. It's every year as a device rep, you have to keep up on that, and you have to keep that current or else you're not allowed in the hospital. When I jumped over into ophthalmology, the retail side specifically, all of that went away. Mm-hmm. So for me, I did a dance. It was just something I didn't have to keep up with any longer. And even though we were still heavily monitored, something called the Sunshine Act, things you can and can't do, things you can and can't purchase. Yep. It just was a little bit more relaxed than some of the things we do on the device side. I didn't feel as though we had to constantly be thinking of what we're saying and doing on a regular basis. The stress level is definitely not as high. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciated that as well. And the territory was smaller. So I think that's another huge nuance, is that you do tend to get smaller territories, kind of like in a pharma position. You're just in a more isolated, generalized location.
So if you can give us 3 qualities that you think as someone that wants to be an ophthalmology rep or is considering that should have, what would they be?
Extremely outgoing, someone who really is confident, because you do go into offices on a daily basis, multiple offices at a time. They have patients in there. Patients come first. You're just there to bring value with the products that they carry. So sometimes they don't see you. They don't want to see you. Sometimes they're having a bad day and you're the one they take it out on. So someone who's confident, and then I think really someone who's persistent. But that really is indicative, I think, of both ophthalmology and any med device. You have to have thick skin. You can't take things personally.
So you wouldn't say there's any any other thing that's nuanced specifically to ophthalmology that's a little different from other medical sales?
I think one of the other nuances is that it is so specific to the eye. And again, a part of the body that there's not multiple other things that can be affected or go along with it. You're only dealing with the eye. So for me, it was just very laser focused. And I didn't have all these other parts and pieces to think about. It was just one specific thing that I could focus on. So I think more of just a laser focus on what you're doing in your product was a nuance.
Sure. All right. Let's take it back to college, senior year. You were about to start life. Did you know you're going to be a medical sales rep, or was it something else?
No. Not at all. My path was definitely not that. I grew up in a family where my father was the president of a very large company and my mom was in medicine. So medicine was not my goal or not my path because I just didn't seem interested in it. I actually was going to go to work for my dad's business when I graduated from college, which is what I did. He was in the packaging industry. Okay. So paper and packaging. And I did go to work for his company. I worked for his company during the summers when I was still in college and got a lot of experience. And then I got a territory. Actually, let me back up. Before I got the territory, I went inside to customer service and got a little bit more experience with the geography and then got a full-on territory and worked for my dad for a few years. Great industry, but became evident to me early on two things. One, not an industry I wanted to be in for the rest of my life. And two, I love my dad so much that I could not be with him any longer or else our relationship would never last. So yeah, I literally quit my job one day and didn't have a job. Wow. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just knew that wasn't it. So I got a job in retail. I started researching other sales roles because I really loved the aspect of sales. I just didn't know what I wanted to sell. Sure. I went to college I started out as a political science major and switched over to business. So I had a degree in business administration with a minor in marketing. So I really didn't know what I wanted to sell. I just knew I wanted to sell something because I knew that I wanted to be in front of people. So, and I was really great at relationship building. So I started looking around. I had a friend recommend pharmaceutical and I started looking at pharmaceutical and I thought, well, this sounds great. And then got in with a recruiter. She recommended that I look at med device. And so I said, okay, sure, I'm willing to do either. And for me, the intrigue was the money. And, no lie, I'm not going to lie. The money was my motivating factor. It wasn't because it was med device or pharma. It was more the money. And I was fresh out of college and needed to make a lot of it. So I looked at that and then she got me an interview and she told me, you're not going to get this job. They have already picked their candidate, but I'm putting you in front of this manager because I know him really well. He can give me really unbiased feedback on how you interview, and then we can go from there. Mm-hmm. So when she told me I wasn't going to get the job, that just motivated me to do anything and everything I could to make sure I got the job. So I put together a business plan. I spoke to a couple of other reps in the geography and I went to the interview, and long story short, that was my first job in med device. They took a chance on me versus a tenured rep of 20 years, and best decision I ever made. I never looked back. So I will give a piece of advice on that. Anyone who's looking to get into the industry, always talk to people in the companies that you're interviewing with. Reach out to them on LinkedIn, network with them. You would be surprised how much weight that carries.
So let me ask you this. We do here with our program, and it's extremely competitive now. How do you see things like what we do for people that want to get into the industry?
So I think it's amazing, quite honestly, for a couple of reasons. There weren't things like this. I've been in this industry for 20 years. So there weren't things like this when I was trying to get into the industry. So any help that you guys provide, I think is just amazing. I think that people should take advantage of it. I know there's medical device school programs, but in my opinion, a lot of that is just like any other school. I mean, you can go to real estate school and get a real estate license, but when you graduate with that license, you still don't have customers. You still have to go out and find them. So a program like yours, who actually helps people not only get a job, but be prepared for that job, is completely invaluable, in my opinion.
Awesome. That's awesome. Okay. So you got into your first medical device gig. What field was it?
I went to work for a company we did a little bit of everything. We did sharps containers. We did some products in the chemotherapy cancer patient space. So yeah, it was device. It was completely disposable device is what it was.
So then why don't you tell the audience, tell us all the fields you've been in.
Okay, so where do we start? So I've done disposable, I have done capital, I've done DVT prophylaxis and prevention, I've done fetal and vascular monitoring, I have done orthopedics, I've done neuro, I have done breast mastectomies, not plastic specifically, but mastectomies for cancer patients. I've done general surgery, I've done colorectal, I have done, okay, so this was another jump. I did lab for a little while where I
Wow.
did molecular residual disease testing and hereditary cancer screening. And I did ophthalmology. And then again, back into the world that I was the most successful, which is more the quote orthopedic space, the space I know the best. So I've done a little bit
You
of
really
everything.
have
Yeah.
done just about all
Yeah.
of it. So so your favorite space is orthopedic then?
Yeah, it really is. I love this space. I do. It's again being in the OR, seeing what's going on, and just being that consultant for the surgeon. Absolutely love. I like to be right in the middle of it all. I don't just like to. I like to be the star of the show, not the supporting actress. So,
Which
and the
which
devices I sell typically are the star of the show. So.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Which field would you say gave you the most work-life balance?
Definitely ophthalmology.
Oh,
Yeah, I've done in med device now, again, a little unique. I did trauma, I did burn. Definitely no work-life balance there. Trauma, you are on call 24/7. And if trauma happens,
right.
you're there. If they're utilizing your product, you're there. I remember my days. We lived in Orlando and I had trauma in Daytona. And during bike week in Daytona, I just slept at the hospital. So I never went home. Now that was pre-children. Once we started our family, I jumped out of the trauma space. It just was not going to be conducive. So I jumped out of that space. But ophthalmology definitely brought me the most work-life balance. And again, I think it was the role specifically. I was dealing more with regular office-based hours and I had a very small geography so that I could be home in the mornings when my kids left for school and I was home in the afternoons when they got there.
That is very cool. Okay. Well, I'm going to call you Mrs. Experience. Is there any other thing you'd like to share with our audience?
I mean, I just, I think for me, they're somewhat of a mission. And I appreciate that you guys reached out because I've mentioned it earlier. I've been in this space for 20 years. You can be a mom and a wife and a female in this industry. You just have to want it bad enough and you have to figure out the balance. And this industry will wear you out. It will burn you completely out. But if you manage it instead of letting it manage you, it can be the most rewarding thing you've ever done in your life. So I definitely tell women specifically, do not shy away. Do not think you can't do it. I'm living proof. I'm not any smarter than anybody. I don't have an MBA. When I started this industry, I didn't even know what anatomy and physiology meant. And back then they didn't train us to know what it meant. We learned OJT on the job. So you can do it if you want it bad enough. You just have to focus and do it.
And I'd also add, medical sales, just like you've experienced, it's vast. And there are fields that can give you a lot of work-life balance, and there are fields that can give you very little work-life balance. The opportunity for you is which field makes sense for you.
Right. And I think too, if sales is not your thing, because you do go through some pretty intense sales specific training in this industry, and it will vary depending on who you work for. Some companies want you to do needs-based selling. Some companies, again, when you're in the OR, you don't have a lot of time to ask a lot of questions. You get to the point, you answer the question, and then you stay quiet. So it just really depends on what you're doing. But the training for sales specific roles is great. But you might get in sales and say, this really isn't for me, but do your time and then you can maybe move into a product manager role or a marketing position. But I think it's really important to know that a lot of the companies in this industry are going to promote from within and they're going to promote based on success and tenure. So I think those are just two of the biggest things to realize.
Absolutely. All right, Dena, are you ready for our lightning round?
Oh boy, I don't know.
You have less
Sure.
than 10 seconds to answer each question.
Okay, got it.
All right, question number 1. What is the best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Okay, I haven't read a book in 6 months. Honestly,
Wow.
full
Wow. Okay.
disclosure, I haven't
Okay.
had time.
Hey, it is what it is. What is the best book you have read last?
Best book I have read last. So I'm gonna go out on a limb on this one, The Purpose Driven Life. I love that book, and actually I've read it more than once. So when I lose foundation, I go back and read it again.
Hey, come on, that's fantastic. Okay, the best TV show or movie you've seen in the last 6 months?
Okay, so Movie or TV show? Gosh, again, I just don't get a lot of time to do either. My daughter and I love to do series on, streaming. And we've done the whole Stranger Things. I can't
Okay.
say I loved it, but I was so intrigued by it, I couldn't stop watching. So,
Sure. I'll give you that one. And then best meal you've had in the last 6 months.
okay, so Starbucks is a major food group for me. So it's my coffee.
She called Starbucks a food group. What type of coffee? You can't tell us it's your favorite place and not give us the name of the coffee.
Okay, so I have an addiction. I admit it. I'm fully aware of it. Every morning, I have a tall peppermint mocha with oat milk,
Oh,
and they
wow.
know me at Starbucks, and they have it ready for me every morning at the same time.
Wow.
So that's really bad. I spend way too much money there, but that's my breakfast.
That actually sounds tasty right now. Okay. And then lastly, what's the best experience you've had in the last 6 months?
Best experience in the last, honestly, I think this new role I'm in, it hasn't been very long, but I just am so entrenched in what this specific device is doing. So I think for me, it's just getting this chance to be able to see it live in cases and see how it's going to make a difference for patients.
That is awesome.
That's professionally. Personally, I will tell you, we made a move back to Florida and we're living at the beach. So for me, come on, life doesn't get any better than that. Yeah.
It's a win. You know what? Well, thank you, Dena, for spending time with us. We've learned so much from your experience, and we're looking forward to all the wonderful things you will continue to do in the medical sales space.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too. And that was Dena Lewis. Quite a career. She's experienced so many different roles. Such a pleasure to hear her. And it's really positioned her to be a consultant, which she is today. That's really given her the flexibility and freedom that she's always wanted. So you might be listening to this episode and you might have heard a few roles that Dena has spent time in and thought to yourself, this is exactly where I want to be. Well, you already know what I'm going to say if you listen to this show for any amount of time. Go to evolveyoursuccess.com, fill out the application, and let's have a conversation to help get you into a role and give you a story of what your experience is in the medical sales space. Medical sales is something that you guys already know I'm a huge champion of. It creates amazing opportunities. It creates a very healthy lifestyle. It creates so much knowledge and innovation, and it really allows you to be part of something much bigger than yourself. And it makes sense why so many people want to be in medical sales. It also makes sense why there are programs like ours that will help you do it because it's so competitive. So some of you might be listening to this and you're beating your head up against the wall because you've been trying to get into a position. Maybe you've been interviewing and it's not falling. Maybe you've been trying to get an interview and you just can't get one. Well, stop beating your head up against the wall. We have a solution. evolveyoursuccess.com. Fill out the application and let's have a conversation and get you where you want to be. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that are really experiencing the life of medical sales, whether it be an individual contributor, a hiring manager, an executive, or a CEO. We're bringing their stories right to your doorstep so you can listen in and figure out where you want to be and how you can get there. As always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and make sure you tune in next week for another episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.